Welcome. This documentary is continued work that I did on my documentary, The Greatest Lie Ever Told. History is not what you think. And also included in this would be a Khazarian Khaganate, U.S. and Israel as Russian vassal states. And I'm going to tie these two theses together and show you why should we trust Russia? This goes pretty deep. It goes into the Bible and linguistics, things that will be explained why, like, theses of people like David Duke are wrong because they refuse to look and do any real research into this. They count on some stupid ass DNA test that says XYZ. I'm going to tell you and show you how and why this thesis that they're giving is inaccurate and explain it. Yeah, and I want to include in this this thesis of this Christian identity. In other words, people thinking that the white people were the Hebrew Israelites is completely wrong. Part of that came out of the Schofield Reference Bible, and also as the where this whole Zionist Christian crap came out of. They're kind of connected, that whole theory, which is just more crap to take you off the scent of these Khazars, or these imposters of Judaism, or the Hebrew Israelites, and also their claimed right to be in Palestine. So we're going to dig deep in that. And there's one other thing that before we get digging in on this that I want to point out. I get these arguments, people latch on to little tidbits of things that I've said in my documentary, The Greatest Lie Ever Told, History is Not What You Think, where I include people from China, India, the whole eastern regions as Caucasians. Caucasians is a term that was developed for the people that came up through the Caucasus Mountains via Japheth. Okay, he was we're going to get into Japheth. This is the key part. So we start off basically with Genesis 10, 1 through 3. We'll go through linguistics, historical evidence, and the lot. This is going to be pretty deep for you guys, and hopefully this is going to clear up a lot of stuff for you folks. That's the intention of this. So with that, we're just going to get started and dig right in. Many would claim that this Khazarian theory would be inaccurate, and it's a propaganda piece put out by a Jew, Arthur Kessler. But in fact, they just don't want to look into the Bible, and they'll claim that, oh, the Bible was written by the same Jews. No, it wasn't. And or Jesus was a Jew. No, he wasn't. He was a Nazarene. You can actually get by that by just calling it the Table of Nations. That just means the people. So where did the Table of Nations start with? We'll call it post-flood. Post-flood is really not just 2 people making the nations, but it's actually 6 people making the nations. That's Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who had wives themselves that came from corrupted stock of pre-flood individuals. Understanding this will help you. And if you're so concerned about going into the Bible, which, they don't want you to do, they don't want you to look in the Bible. So, we'll call it the Table of Nations. If you get an authentic representation of the Table of Nations, it's going to basically mirror what it says in the Bible of the descendants of Noah. So in the Table of Nations, or the Genesis 10, 1 through 3, this is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. In this particular section, it goes straight to Japheth. It's kind of amazing. This is the first one that's spoke about, and you will get into a little bit more about this, but in this it says the Japhethites, the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. In this portion, we're going to focus on the offspring of Noah, his son Japheth. The etymology of the name Japheth has few meanings. One of them, most popular, based on Genesis 9:27, translated as, "May God make Japheth wide, enlarge, or extend him." This was an indication that his descendants will be more populous than those of Shem and Ham. Other sources interpreted the meaning of his name as fair, being white-skinned in color. Targum of Jonathan renders the translation as, "God shall beautify Japheth." From the 70 linguistically different nations who settled the earth after God's dispersion of the peoples of the Tower of Babel, Japheth's descendants contributed to 14 progenitors. The territory of their settlement is called the Northern Zone. This is North Asian Minor, basically anything north of the Caucasus Mountains between the Black and Caspian Sea, north of the Mediterranean and Europe. Japheth is called the father of Indo-European family of nations. Remember, nations just means people. Out of the 14 progenitors of Japheth came these nations: Greeks, Romans, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Slavs, Russians, Bulgarians, Poles, Scandinavians, and Anglo-Saxons, and others. There is quite an interesting opinion that late author Dr. Ernest L. Martin that the descendants of Japheth were not European people, at least not on a massive scale as many thought they were, that Japheth is not the father of Indo-European race. Rather, he thinks that Japheth is the father of the Mongoloid-type people of yellow race. In modern day, they are the nations of Asiatic powers such as China, Japan, India, Korea, and many others of the region of Southeast Asia, Far East, and Oceania. Dr. Martin does not reject the possibility that Mesha and Tubal could represent Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. He is also not denying the fact that after the dispersal of the human race in the aftermath of the rebellion at the Tower of Babel, the descendants of Japheth went originally to Europe and gave their names to the nations and geographical locations they were dwelled in. That is why the ancient historians were confused with the identifications of those nations and National Geographic before the Greeks dominated the world in Roman times. Later on, continues Dr. Martin, under the massive push of hordes of Assyrians, Israelites, the 10 tribes, and other Semitic migrants from Eastern Mediterranean and other Mesopotamian areas to Europe, the Japhetic nations had to move farther north and east into Asia. Thus, Gomer, Javan, Togarmah, and Kittim left Europe and went to China, where they settled and gave their name to the region. Cathay is the name of China, and in their own language, after the word Kittim, in the writings of medieval traveler Marco Polo and the Persian astronomer Nasir al-Din al-Tusi in 1272, we are told that China was known to outsiders by the name of Cathay, or Kitai, or Kataya, or Kathayan, the Kitayans, which very closely resembles the name of Kittim. There is no sense of unity amongst the scholars' views to which modern-day country each descendant of Japheth represents. Gomer means complete, but Gomer, the first son of Japheth, the father of Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah, at Genesis 10:2-3. Josephus Flavius said that Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galathians, but were then called Gomerites. Antiquities of the Jews 1-6. In Islamic folklore, there is a story that Gomer lived up to 1,000 years, as did Nimrod, the son of Cush. Hippolytus of Rome in 234 after Christ, said that Gomer was the ancestor of the Cappadocians, neighbors of the Galatians. Anatolian, Galathian, is the modern-day territory of Turkey and was the home of the Gomerites, the Celts, that's what they're saying. Theophilus Evans, the Welsh antiquarian, in 1716 said that Gomer was one of the ancestors of the Welsh people. The Talmudic sources point out that Gomer, along with Ashkenaz, gave rise to the people of modern Germany. Other sources said that from Gomer came out the Armenians, the Sumerians, the Scythians, Welsh, Irish, Huns, Germans, Franks, and Turks. Well-known ancient historians such as Herodotus, Strabo, and Plutarch indicated that Gomer settled in Europe north of the Baltic Sea and the Crimea. Anciently, Gomer was known as the Cimmerians, Gemerii, who dwelt in the Eurasian steppes south of Russia, Crimea, and Ukraine. The Scythians chased them out into Armenia and Minor Asia, Turkey. We read all these stories and identifications of Gomer, but nobody, except for Dr. Martin and S. Collins, just two, as far as we know, have connected this firstborn son of Japheth, a warlike ally of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38:6, to the most populous and mighty country of the world, China. The rest of the 6 sons of Japheth produced the following people and countries. Let's see, Magog, Scythians, Slavs, Russians, Bulgarians, Bohemians, Poles, Slavics, and Croatians. Madai, Indians, that would be Hindu Indians of India. Iranic, from Iran. Medes, Persians, Afghans, Kurds. Javan, Greece, Romans, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. Tubal, south of the Black Sea city of Tbilisi in Georgia, and the Caucasus theory. Misha, Russia, city of Moscow. Tiras, Thracians, Teutons, Germans, Slavonians, Anglo-Saxons, and Jutes. There are 7 sons of Japheth and their generations today. Gomer begat 3 sons, Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. That's Genesis 10:3. Ashkenaz is the name derived from the Assyrian Ishkuza, and also identified with Scythians, Saka, and Samaritans. The rabbinic literature, Ashkenaz is believed to be the ancestor of Armenian, Germanic, and Scandinavian and Slavic people. Ashkenaz and his father Gomer are closely identified with the most expositors of the progenitors of German peoples. Rephath, a Cusher, Josephus said Rephath founded the Raphians, now called Paphlagons. Antiquities 1:6:1, which was a province of Asia Minor. Later they migrated to northwest Russia, to the Baltic Sea and the Gulf of Finland, and the Carpathian Mountains may be named after them. Their descendants today are known as Finno-Ugric people, Baltic Finns, Estonians, Karelians, Mordvinians, Komi, Udmarts, Hungarians, Aztecs, and Mansi. There are also Finno-Ugric people. Some researchers have found that linguistic connections between the ancient Sumerians and the Euro-Altaic people, Togarmah, Armenians, Georgians, the people of the South Caucasus, Liketi, and others add Germany and Turkey. The historians of Josephus, 37 C and 100 AD, Jerome 347 to 420 after death, and Isidore of Seville, 560 to 636 AD, said that Togarmah was the father of the Phrygians. Phrygia was a kingdom in the west central part of Anatolia, which is now modern-day Turkey. Saint Hippolytus, 170 AD to 236 AD, Eusebius of Caesarea, And Bishop Theodoret, 393 to 547 AD, regarded Togarmah as the father of Armenians. The territory of Togarmah in the last days was spoken by the prophet Ezekiel at 38:6, when he prophesied that the house of Togarmah of the north quarters will join together with Gomer's band and the invasion armies of Gog against Israel. These are the sons of Gomer in their generations today. Jevon begot 4 sons: Elisha, Tarshish, and Kittim, and Dodanian. That's at Genesis 10:4. We can basically go on and on with this exercise, but the purpose of it is to show 2 things. One, that these are the descendants of Japheth, who became the most populous people on the face of the earth, and was prophesied in Genesis 9:27. God shall enlarge Japheth. The other part of this exercise is to show that none of these people in this whole exercise have anything to do with the lineage of the actual Semitic people that would bring forth both the Hebrew Israelites and Jesus Christ. Censorship, and particularly self-censorship, has been going on a long time. And in my opinion, one of the biggest self-censorships, and including censorship in general, was the Bible. Now, thankfully, we had the early internet of the day. That would be the Gutenberg printing press that actually allowed common folk to have access to the words in the Bible. We also have had different elements taking or removing books out, and it seems that some of them were done by like popular votes and of powers that maybe shouldn't be. And one of the strange ones, or most interesting ones at least, would be the book of Enoch. I've asked major religious scholars, Bible scholars, why was the book of Enoch removed from the Bible? And not one of them can answer this. And so I want to go into some stuff that's of particular interest, particularly concerning the argument of how so few people could make the races of our planet today so diverse. So I'll go into this part. It's actually Enoch 151 through 3, and here's how it reads. After a time, my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech. She became pregnant by him and brought forth a child, the flesh of which was as white as snow and red as a rose, the hair of whose head was white like wool and long, and whose eyes were beautiful. He illuminated all the house like the sun. The whole house abounded with the light. And when he was taken from the hand of the midwife, opening his mouth, he spoke to the Lord of righteousness. Then Lamech, his father, was afraid of him, and flying away came to his father Methuselah, and said, I have begotten a son, unlike our other children. He is not human, but resembling the offspring of the angels of heaven, is of a different nature from ours, being altogether unlike us. These are the verses in the book of Enoch provided a glimpse into what was going on around the world at the time of Noah's birth. In order to make it easier, we're going to break down the information into sections. What the text says, that number 1, Noah was born with white skin. Number 2, Noah didn't look like other humans. Lamech believed Noah was the son of an angel, and angels were having children on earth. What the text implies, white skin was not common among humans. The children of the angels, the Nephilim, were white. Although the Nephilim play a very important role in Noah's flood, they're beyond the scope of this research. But if you're interested in a deeper study, I'll surely hook you up with it or information on it. Or just go peruse through the book of Enoch. And so it just really kind of opens up a whole bunch of more questions. Let's try to walk through this DNA mess as people like David Duke and his buddy Kevin McDonald, want to put forth. They're not the only ones, but I'm kind of let down by the fact that they went with this mess. So in order to do this accurately, and we'll do it in the most simplest terms as possible, we have to go and start with Abraham and Abraham's seed, who received the covenant. That would be his seed. And as it goes, Abraham had a child, or had a son, Isaac. Isaac had 3 kids. He had Ishmael from a concubine. Ishmael is the father to Islam. Interesting, as you go into studying Islam without getting too technical, basically their prophet Muhammad accepted Christ as the Messiah. And that's an interesting point to look at and understand why Jews of today hate Islam so bad. The other 2 sons were Jacob and Esau. They were twins. Esau was the firstborn, and Jacob by name means grabbing the heel or holding the heel, meaning that he came out second. Well, through Jacob, Judaism and Christianity formed, and with Esau losing his inheritance, there's many stories about it, but the main reason that he lost his inheritance was as he had angered his mother over marrying a Hittite woman, meaning white women, which if you go back into the book of Enoch, that would mean that the bloodline was impure. So out of that, we got the Sephardi Jews. The Sephardi Jews and the Ashkenazim, who cling together in today's societies. The Sephardi, while coming from the Abrahamic bloodline, are not legitimate Jews. They are converts, the same as the Ashkenaz were in the land of Khazar. So that's really all there is to say about this. These Jews, they intermingle, marry, have children with the Sephardis and Ashkenazis mixing blood. So there's a good reason that they will show traits of the Abrahamic bloodline, but they are not legitimate. They are not legitimate Jewish or whatever they claim to be. We'll just leave it at that and move along. Just as we see for that period of time, and even looking today at the people of different countries, and we'll start with Iran, which was called Persia. It appears that the Aryan race was quite influential there, which is actually under the Caucasian human type, I guess you could call it, or subgroup. You can go from the Iranian plateau through northern parts of Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, all the way to the coast. That would be the Iranian plateau. In Persian, the word Aryan, actually, that's the only place linguistically that uses that term, Aryan. So was it hijacked or to use for white race? I'm not really certain, but today it indicates that, and it also shows in the people in Persia. Now, you got to remember, Persia was invaded by Arabs some time back. But anyway, that same diversity goes into the Khazar kingdom, but primarily the descendants of Japheth were the heart of the Khazar kingdom. And the Ashkenaz, which is a grandson of Japheth, the nation showed their face along the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, the Steppes region. And you have to go into some work I did on a radio show called the Khazarian Khaganate, or the Mongolian Marauders, which I explained this whole bit of the Turkic-Mongol mix and how the Khazarian Khaganate formed in Russia. And we're going to get into the Jews in Russia right now. understanding that original Russia was constructed from Slavs and Kievan Rus and some Finn people made up the heart of original Russia, which actually was in today's Ukraine, and Kiev was their original capital. But that all changed later, and we'll go into that a little bit. But you have to understand that the Kievan Rus and the other Aryan people of Russia really did not sit well with the people of Khazar. They did battle with them, actually defeated their country. And that all changed after the Mongol hordes with Temujin Genghis Khan. And as a result, I believe that these Khazars, or Ashkenazi converts, actually made some concessions or cut some deals with Temujin and the Golden Horde, which would be Temujin's sons and grandsons, which set up Russia as basically a Khazarian Khaganate. So anyway, we'll go into the history of Jews in Russia. Originally, they were not Mongol Turks. They're actually Ashkenazim, which come directly from Japheth. That's Japheth's grandson. Jews in the Russian Empire have historically constituted a large religious diaspora. The very vast territories of the Russian Empire at one time hosted the largest population of Jews in the world. Within these territories, the primarily Ashkenazi Jewish communities of many different areas flourished and developed into modern-day Judaism. Judaism's most distinctive theological and cultural traditions, while also facing periods of anti-Semitic and discriminatory policies and persecutions. So they were playing victim in Russia, just like everywhere else that they've been. So I don't necessarily buy that. The largest group among Russian Jews are Ashkenazi Jews, but the community also includes a significant number of other diasporous Jewish groups, such as Mountain Jews, Sephardi Jews, which you need to pay attention to, Sephardic Jews, Crimean Karaites, Krimchaks, Boko Haram Jews, and Georgian Jews. The presence of Jewish people in Europe, part of Russia, can be traced to the 7th and 14th centuries CE. In the 11th and 12th centuries, the Jewish population in Kiev, in present-day Ukraine, restricted to a separate quarter, eventually presented a Jewish people in Muscovite Russia, is first documented in the Chronicles of 1471 during the reign of Catherine II. And the 18th century, the Jewish people were restricted to Pale of Settlement within Russia, the territory where they could live or immigrate to. Alexander III escalated anti-Jewish policies beginning in the 1880s. A wave of anti-Jewish pogroms swept across different regions for the empire for several decades. More than 2 million Jews fled, so they say. I think they were sent out of Russia between 1880 and 1920, mostly to the United States. Well, it seems that things started to really heat up for the Aryan lineage of the Tsars in Russia when Alexander refused this Rothschild monetary system to enslave the Russian people. So it seems to me that they festered up a bunch of the Jews of Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, Czech, and Ukraine to start acting up and causing problems for Tsar Alexander. That would be 1 through 3, where these guys started these groups to cause problems for the rulers of Russia. And anyway, so we'll just go through this piece that I got set up for you. It's the state banking of the Russian Empire. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a different system of finance via state banking had been adopted from September 1814 to June 1815. The Congress of Vienna was held in order to settle the issues arising from French Revolutionary Wars, the Napoleonic, and the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. Behind the scenes, Nathan Mayer Rothschild proposed the formation of a new world order concentrated around central banking. All the major powers, with the exception of Russia, were indebted to Rothschild banks. Tsar Alexander I, 1801 through 1825, refused to comply with the Rothschilds' devious scheme and derailed it. Instead, he established the Holy Alliance between Austria, Prussia, and Russia, which was signed on September 26, 1815. Emperor Francis I of Austria, King Frederick Wilhelm III of Prussia, and Tsar Alexander. He also rejected Rothschild's offer to set up a central bank in Russia. Whether it was because he distrusted the shady banker or was aware of the perils of central banking is not known. But he wisely declined. However, his prudent behavior incurred the vindictive and unrelenting wrath of Rothschilds, who, according to Major General Count Sherip Spiridonovich, were responsible for the assassination of the last 5 czars and would seek to obtain their Talmudic vengeance in spectacular fashion in 102 years later. June 12, 1860, the Bank of the Russian Empire was founded with the aim of boosting trade turnovers and strengthening the monetary system. Up to 1894 was an auxiliary institution under direct control of the Ministry of Finance. In that year, it was transformed to become the banker of the bankers and operated as an instrument of government's policy. It minted and printed the nation's coins and notes, regulated the money supply, and through commercial banks provided industry and commerce with low-interest loans. Its vast gold reserves, the largest in the world, exceeded the banknote issued by more than 100%, except for the year of 1906. By 1914, it had become one of the most influential lending institutions in Europe. Not unexpectedly, Russia had the smallest national debt in the whole world. The following table reflects the numbers of rubles of debt per inhabitant. By 1914, 83% of the interest and amortization of the national debt, of which was less than 2%, was held abroad. It was funded and the profits of the Russian state railways. In 1916, the total length of the main lines was 100,817 versts or kilometers. Russia commercial and canal tonnage of 11,130,000 in 1910 exceeded Britain's merchants' tonnage of 10,750. In 1861, Tsar Alexander II, 1855 through 1881, abolished serfdom, which at the time affected 30% of the population. By 1914, very little land remained in the possession of the Russian estate owners, who were mainly of the nobility. 80% of the arable land was in the hands of the peasants, which had been ceded to them for a very small sum. This land was held in trust by the village commune, or mir. However, after passing the Stolypin Act of 1906, peasants could obtain individual title and hereditary rights. By 1913, 2 million families had availed themselves of this opportunity to acquire what became known as the Stolypin farms. Nearly 19 million acres, or 7,689 hectares, were allotted to these individual peasant proprietors by the land committees. The Peasants' State Bank, which was described at the time as the greatest and most socially beneficial institution of land credit in the world, granted loans at low interest, which was in effect a handling charge between 1901 and 1912. These loans increased from 222 million rubles to 186 million rubles. Well, anyway, shortly after this, everything changed with the finishing off of the Russian czars, and that would be the murder of Tsar Nicholas and his entire family. Ever since then, it has been pretty much dominantly controlled and owned by oligarchs and Jewish bankers. So I guess all we have to do is look to see how this reflects today. And remember that every single leader of Israel since its founding has been an Ashkenazi Jew from Russia.
It's not just Trump that is connected to Chabad Lubavitch. Chabad Rabbi Ber Lazar is the chief rabbi of Russia. He is very close to President Vladimir Putin. The Jewish oligarchs at Putin's side are also the main financiers of Chabad Lubavitch. Jews control the wealth of Russia, and Chabad is a dominant force. They're not going anywhere. If this offends you, know that there are Russians who agree with me. Chabad can say whatever they want about Gentiles. Meanwhile, Putin is making it illegal to criticize them. A taxi driver in Russia was sentenced to 350 hours of community service for writing online that Jews dominate Russia and the world. Imagine what would happen if we were in Russia. Putin passed a law sentencing Holocaust deniers to 5 years in prison. Russia is virtually free of anti-Semitism. Putin is calling for Jews to emigrate to Russia. Jews destroy your country. Why would Putin be welcoming them into Russia? That's because they're not a threat. They've already destroyed Russia with Marxism and took it over 100 years ago. It's the West which they are currently destroying with cultural Marxism so that they can take it over. As Putin's Rabbi Beryl Lazar puts it, the West lacks mutual respect, unlike Russia. Putin was Israel's Person of the Year in 2015, despite working with Syria and Iran. Reuven Rivlin, the president of Israel, says that Putin is loyal to Israel's security. If you read the comments on RT's videos, you might actually believe that Putin is against Israel. But Putin's Rabbi Beryl Lazar says that ties with Israel have never been closer. Israel has a simple message. We don't put all our eggs in one basket. We don't rely only on America. Putin is arming the Arab and Muslim states and working with Israel exactly as the Soviet Union was doing. He's profiteering from the war in Syria. He's not there because he wants to defend Christianity. That's literally KGB propaganda. Putin supported Israel during their 2014 bombing campaign of Gaza. Chief Sephardic Rabbi of Israel, Yitzhak Yosef, said to Putin, "According to the Jewish tradition, your leadership is decided by the kingdom of God, King of the world, and therefore we bless you. Blessed is the one who gave of his glory to flesh and blood." The Sanhedrin contacted Breaking Israel News to announce that the election of Trump, who has promised to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, coupled with Putin's expressed desire for the temple to be rebuilt, prompted the Jewish court to send a letter offering the two the opportunity to act as modern-day Cyrus figures, non-Jewish kings who recognize the importance of Israel and the temple. An Israeli bystander called out in Russian, "Welcome, President Putin." Putin approached the man who explained the importance of the Temple Mount and the Jewish temple. Shadrei Sharadin, an Orthodox Hebrew news site, reported that Putin responded, "That's exactly the reason I came here, to pray for the temple to be built again." Putin's on our side, says Beryl Lazar. Chabad Lubavitch, who is pushing to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, wields tremendous influence in both Russia and Israel. When Ben-Gurion announced plans to rule the world from Jerusalem, calling for a world alliance and no more wars, that always included Russia. Some people will say, "Oh, but the Jewish media is against Russia." That media isn't pushing Israelis to go to war with Russia. It's pushing Americans to fight a war that they are not going to win. As you've heard earlier, the rabbis want a large war. When the dust settles, Putin will be fine, whereas the United States will be bled dry just like Germany after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. Israel will take its place as the new superpower.
Or maybe if we let the Russian investigations carry through and take note of the fact that Trump has been deeply embedded for eons with not only Israel but Russia. This goes back to the 80s easily with his Trump Tower and Soho and the Chabad Lubavitch operating right directly out of Trump Tower. He sold a whole floor to him when he first built the Trump Tower. So let's not be fooled. As I said, this Israel and United States as being Russian vassal states, to me, Israel might just be some kind of a deflection from the real string pullers, and that would be through Russia, of course, with Rothschild kind of pulling the strings on the oligarchs. It's more complicated than people think, but I think that's kind of the direction that my research has taken me. So with that, you guys, hope you like this and hope it connects some dots for you. I'm not posting on YouTube currently, so I hope that you guys will share everything, download it, copy it to your pages, do whatever it takes to get the message out. We're in some deep shit with World War III heated up, which who knows, that could be some kind of kabuki theater, but also we know that the bankers could potentially use this whole thing as a reason to crash the global economy, really tear up stuff. Remember, order out of chaos. With that, thanks for watching. Wardo out.